Pac-Man. More like the video game called Mortal Kombat 4 for the Game Boy.
Hey, before we begin, follow El Twitter. The last one got banned because I posted Viper the Rapper. Follow El Instagram. I posted La Meme. Sub to La Patreon. I need money. And yeah, that's it. Oh, and I have a Threads now too. Oh shit, here comes Pac-Man.
Yo, 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 yo! What it is, motherfuckers?
Hey, Pac-Man, what's up?
Me, you bitches! I'm high on crack! Wanna free this?
No, Pac-Man, drugs are bad. Nope, can't help you, man.
Pussies! Whoa! Holy shit!
Say that you a lesbian, girl, me too.
Alrighty, boys, I'm gonna be real honest here. I'm a real packaholic. I'm a pack addict, even. But I've been going through some real pack withdrawal recently. I just need the pack, man. I just need a hit of the pack, man. Just a little hit.
Tim put his passion for Pac-Man to music in a song called Pac-Man is Naked and So Should You.
So this intro was pretty much already cut out for me, you know, for very obvious reasons. I think we all know who Pac-Man is at this point. I know Pac-Man, you know Pac-Man, my fucking mom knows Pac-Man, my grandma knows Pac-Man. It's the classic arcade game. You're a little yellow guy and you eat dots and kill ghosts. Of course, the franchise as long and massive as Pac-Man, there have been many attempts to revitalize the franchise. Some of these are actually really goddamn good. The Pac-Man World games are pretty great for the most part, and Pac-Man Championship is probably the best version of Pac-Man ever. But they can't all be winners. Easily one of the weirdest and one of the most misguided is Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. This was Bandai Namco's little multimedia Pac-Man project, where they redesigned all the characters and gave Pac-Man lore. And then they made Nintendo put him in fucking Mario Kart. Now the redesigns that kinda start with this game called Pac-Man Party.
Pac-Man Party!
A game that has fuck all to do with the actual lore of Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures. Like seriously, this is a simple party game, right? And then 3 years later, there's a Pac World War and a love triangle now. Fuck you.
Let's see how far they can fly on borrowed wings.
I just took that extra up. We'll see y'all get kicked fucked up.
This was Bandai Namco's way of trying to Sonicize Pac-Man, in the same way Sonic Adventure gave Sonic green eyes and a deeper lore. A citation needed. And of course it went about as well as you think it would. Just a complete fucking train wreck. It was thankfully killed off by Masahiro Sakurai. Thank Jesus. But even then, Namkai Bando Blambo Rambo really pushed this thing the best they could. Again, there was a whole TV show, a whole Mario Kart arcade game, and most importantly, 2 video games. 3 if you count Pac-Man Museum, a compilation of older Pac-Man games. And I'm gonna cover all these games, because I have nothing better to do with my life. Now, how come I'm covering the games and not the TV show? Well, simply put, I did the math, and it would take me around 22 hours to watch the entire series. That's 22 hours of shit like this.
Oh man, I'm a me.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Pac-Man The Ghostly Adventures is a 3D platformer game developed by Monkey Bar Games, who made Dora the Explorer, Journey to the Purple Planet. In 2013, this game graced the Wii U, the PS3, the 360, and the PC. There's also a 3DS version, who cares? And the best part about this game is that you literally, can't buy it anymore. Okay, well, that's a lie, actually. There are physical versions all over the place, but because Namco Bandai is, I guess, embarrassed of this era of Pac-Man, which is ironic since they spent the better part of, like, 2 years pushing it to the forefront, they ended up delisting this game from all storefronts because game preservation, baby.
Pac-Man! Deny.
By the way, I own both the 360 and the PC version of this game. Don't ask why. For this video, I did play the 360 version, but I also own the PC version, and dear God, it's not very good. For one thing, apparently, the game crashes when you run it at anything over 1440p. But for a second thing, it's capped at 30 frames per second? What? Why? To be fair, all versions of this game are capped at 30 frames. And for like the 360 era hardware, sure, that's fine. But I'm playing on PC. This should not be a thing at all. It's so embarrassingly bare bones. Anyways, let's talk the actual game. You play as a Pac-Man, and it's your job to go through one of the worst stories in gaming history. Murdering ghosts and fighting this guy named fucking Betrayus? Yeah, again, this is part of the show's lore. In the show, the ghosts who are the bad guys of Pac-Man aren't the bad guys in this universe, but rather the bad guy is the worst design I've ever fucking seen, with the worst name I've ever heard in my life, Betrayus. Do you guys remember Star Wars The Force Unleashed, and how George Lucas proposed that the main character's name should be named Darth Insano? Yeah, that's what this is like. So many of these new ghosts look absolutely terrible. They completely clash with the Pac people designs, which really aren't that great to begin with. And again, the story in this game itself is just completely awful. They expect you to have seen the show before this, so a lot of stuff that happens in these games is just so fucking confusing. The characters will just randomly drop little trivia factoids to try and fill the audience in, but there's like no context to them or anything.
Check it out. Look what I found.
Whoa! Those are just like the globe my parents left for me.
Oh, they are now, really? Wait, what's a globe and why do they help you at all?
The one that led us to the Temple of Slime.
Oh, okay, they led you to the Temple of Slime, okay. Wait a minute, why is there a Pac-Man e-girl? What the fuck? Why is there a tall red Pac-Man? Huh? You see, someone who isn't into this show won't be able to get into this, but at the same time, the story itself is super bare bones. Like, it's really egregiously awful. It's the narrative equivalent of don't know, don't care. On top of that, the cutscenes are so narratively sterile and static. Characters just stand around for long periods of time, and attempts at humor are extremely stilted.
Yikes!
Whoa!
Sorry about that.
So overall, the story is something not worth covering since nobody cared about it anyways. Let's talk the actual game then, which, you know what, isn't that bad for like the first like 20 minutes. And then it keeps going and more stuff happens in it that's just worse. And then it keeps going and going. And then it just kind of ends weirdly enough. But you know what, starting off, the game isn't that bad actually. It drops you in pretty well. It gives you a grasp on the controls. You learn Pac-Man's eating munch move, where you can eat ghosts in a fast homing attack like succession. It's like an in-between of Sonic Adventure 1 and Mario Galaxy. The problem, however, is those games are great because of the mechanical depth. Mario has subtle abilities like long jumping and backwards jumping. He has a bunch of moves to his arsenal he can use. The Sonic Adventure, meanwhile, has all those upgrades and spin dashing and all that. Meanwhile, Pac-Man can walk, jump, eat, and that's kind of it. It's one of the most basic arsenals in a 3D platformer. Even a game like Battle for Bikini Bottom has like ground pounds and upgrades. Pac-Man doesn't have any of that, so it's kind of a bare minimum moveset. It's not like bad, just kind of Furthermore, the more you go through this game, the more you realize just how stiff all the movement is. Pac-Man's eating a homing attack is really sluggish. The game slows down to show you how cool the move is, and interrupts any combo you actually want to get in this game. Also, quite a few times the levels are way too wide open, but yet the munching attack barely has any range to it, so the whole thing just feels kind of underwhelming as a move. Pac-Man also has a scare move that can scare ghosts, and it makes them vulnerable for a little bit, but the combat isn't that hard or anything, so I rarely used it. Also, I don't know why, but there's a falling down knockback animation in a 3D platformer. Oh yes, I love watching Pac-Man fall down and get up after like 5 seconds. This makes the game even more sluggish than it already is. Oh, and there's also a number of power-ups in this game. Quite a few of them are shockingly kind of annoying, with their own quirks that make them really unfun. And yet, in certain scenarios, you have to use them. Certain level gimmicks require that power-up, and certain enemies require you to defeat them with that power-up. Unlike Mario, these don't feel like actual power-ups. They feel like power obligations. You have to use these power-ups in certain situations. And again, quite a few of these power-ups just aren't very fun to use. There's Ice Pac, who can freeze enemies. However, when you freeze enemies, he comes to a standstill. So you have a whole second or two of vulnerability ability. Oh, by the way, you lose your power-up if you get hit once. So if you get hit by an enemy you didn't see, fuck you. And if you get hit by an enemy because you were frozen in place by your ice power-up you were trying to use, fuck you too. There's also Fire Pack, who's slightly better to use, but he can throw fireballs that are kind of way too slow to actually be useful. Your eating ability is genuinely faster than this, so there's no real point to actually using them. Aside from, of course, taking out the ice enemies who require the fireballs to kill. There's the Stone Pack power-up, whose special ability is controlling like dog shit, and also having a penis nose. There's Rubber Ball Pack, who can jump high and jump off walls. Again, he's incredibly context sensitive, so using him is like, whatever. There's the Balloon Pack, where he becomes a meme and flies around. Again, he's incredibly context sensitive, so using him is like, whatever.
I have an inflated opinion of myself.
There's Metal Pack, who can stick to metal walls and plating. Again, he's incredibly context. There's this one Tornado Pack who's actually kind of fun to use because he can go fast at an actually decent pace in these big ass levels. But by far the worst power-up is the Chameleon Pack one. This power-up fucking sucks ass. For one thing, it replaces the Chomp ability, the kinda fast but not really ability, with this long tongue that's really slow to use, barely has any range, and is pretty much a dice roll as to whether it's actually useful or not. And it can turn invisible, which is useful for like 2 levels in one world. The only reason why you would have to use him is to swing on these context-sensitive vines. Again, that's not a power-up, that's a power obligation. As for the worlds and level design, it's not that great either. I mean, it's pretty serviceable, all things considered. It's fine, but nothing feels unique or stands out. If anything, the only reason these levels might stick out to me is because they're so unmemorable, they might as well be memorable in a weird way. You got your opening city level, you got your ancient temple level, you got your lava fire world, you got your snowy ice world. Oh, but we did something different this time. We put lava in the world now. You then go back to the city, but it's orange now. And you go back to the lava place, but it's green now. And these levels are very, for one thing, these levels are way too wide open. So you spend long stretches of them just kind of walking around. They also feel the same. So when you reach the latter part of the game, it feels like it's running out of steam. This game lacks those really cool set pieces or ideas that Crash Bandicoot does. So by the end, you feel like you're playing just the same level again, with some new gimmick, and it's harder this time, kinda. And that's a really weird thing too. This game can get really frustrating, but it's also way too easy. It constantly feeds you lives and shit. And by the time I got to the latter part of the game, I was well over like 20 lives. So the game is too easy to be challenging, but too frustrating to be fun. I wouldn't call it like a bad game, just a vehemently mediocre one. This is a 5 out of 10 game. There's really not a whole lot to it. There are some fun things here. I think Pac-Man's home attack move could be fun. But again, as the game goes on, you realize how sluggish it is, and just how overall mediocre and cheap the game feels. When this game was announced, I'm pretty sure everybody expected the Sonic 06 of Pac-Man, but it thankfully isn't that. It's kind of the opposite of it, actually. Where Sonic 06 is a barely functional game with good ideas, Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures is a fine, perfectly functional game, but this time with barely any ideas. That's the weird part. It really isn't that bad of a game, but it certainly isn't that good either. Overall, I would not recommend this game unless you're a pure Pac-aholic. Man, I'm so glad the Pac was back for this one. Delisted and mediocre. Pac-Man Museum is a 2014 compilation of Pac-Man video games, and I'm gonna be honest, it kinda sucks dick. Now on the surface, this may sound good. You get a whole bunch of Pac-Man games in this compilation. You got Pac-Man, good ass game. Pac-Man Championship Edition, great ass game. You get Pac-Land, it didn't age the best, but that's fun and revolutionary. Pac-Attack, that weird Pac-Man puzzle game that was actually pretty fun. Pac-Man Battle Royale, that game you find at a Dave & Buster's. Pac-Mania, that game that gave Pac-Man a jump button. Pac-Man Arrangement, that game from the PSP Namco Museum Collection game. I'm not a big fan of either of these. I'm not a fan of Pac-Man in isometric spaces. And finally, there's Super Pac-Man and Pac-N-Pal. These games are known for just being complete dog shit. I kind of fuck with the music in Pac-N-Pal, though. It reminds me of like a Ken Carson type beat.
Yo,
Now you may be wondering, where's Miss Pac-Man? Well, we know the answer now. It's in legal hell. Replaced by Pac-Mom. And exploited like a whore by AtGames. Free my boy Miss Pac-Man. She ain't done nothing, bro. But in this game, Pac-Man Museum, she was available in the game as DLC. Originally free DLC and then becoming paid DLC eventually. Probably because of royalties or some reason. Yeah, Miss Pac-Man has a pretty rough history, legally speaking. I miss her, man. I miss her. Now, what does this game have to do with Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures? Well, you see, by beating a bunch of in-game challenges, you can unlock characters in the Pac Room. These characters being, you guessed it, from the show Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures. Now, what's wrong with this collection, you may be asking? Well, answer number one, on PC, the resolution is locked to 720. That's right, the lowest HD resolution. So playing this damn thing on modern displays is incredibly annoying. This is a really bad PC port, and it's just a bunch of fucking ROMs. Furthermore, that's really all this game includes. A bunch of emulators playing Pac-Man in a bare bones 3D Pac-Man room. It really just is not great. Now, believe it or not, there actually is a sequel, Pac-Man Museum Plus, and it is generally an improvement. There's a better museum mode, it has the original Pac-Man design, there's no Miss Pac-Man, but there are a few more games in this collection, and the resolution doesn't make me want to kill myself. This is overall a better collection than the last one, even if they killed Miss Pac-Man. But the original is just a weird thing to exist, where you have all these classic games with the classic Pac-Man designs, and then you have the Ghostly Adventures characters. It begs the question, who was this made for? Just a really weird collection. Okay, next game. Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures 2 looks a lot like the first game, in a way that's not too flattering at all. When I first saw this game, I thought it was an asset flip. Just take the first game, add some new mechanics here and there, and you're pretty much done. Here's the crazy part though, this game isn't really an asset flip, and is in fact a genuinely pretty big improvement over the original, to the point where Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures 2 is actually a pretty good game. Yeah, I'm saying it. Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures 2 is a fun time. Now, to be fair, this feels more like a good version of the first game, rather than a massive actual improvement. You kinda have to play the first game right beforehand in order to truly appreciate the second one. But overall, like, it's a pretty good game, and a lot of the annoying shit from the first game is fixed. Pac-Man's eating move is a lot more fun to use now. It has a bit more range to it, and most importantly, it's a lot faster now. So getting a good Pac combo down is actually pretty satisfying. They finally have a move that plays to Pac-Man's strengths in a 3D environment, and it does not feel stiff or awkward to use finally. Just don't tell anyone about Pac-Man World. The power-ups are also finally fixed. Here are some of the most notable examples. When Ice Pac-Man uses the freezing move, he can actually move around using it, meaning there's a bit more mobility to him, allowing for a dynamic pack-to-pack combat system. Fire Pac has a gliding move now, and most importantly, Lizard Pac doesn't feel awful to use. First of all, the tongue move does not replace his normal eating move, and for another thing, the tongue move actually is kind of useful, in which it actually hits the enemies you're trying to eat, meaning the power-ups are actually power-ups, and furthermore, you don't lose them when you get a hit. Instead, you press the right bumper to lose your power-up yourself, if you so choose, of course. So now the power-ups are no longer a hassle, or at least for the most part. Stone Pac is still kind of annoying, but otherwise, yeah, this is an improvement. Oh, also, they completely changed the camera too. The original game had a free camera, so you know, you move the camera with the one stick and move the character with the other stick. However, the camera wasn't very good at all in the game, so it was kind of unwieldy to use. The sequel, however, has a static, almost isometric camera. You can't control it anymore, and this actually helps the game. There's less jank and confusion, and the game has a lot more control over its levels. It feels tighter, you know? This new camera is better for this kind of game, in my opinion. It really is kind of like Mario Galaxy, where that game had more of a fixed camera. So yeah, these are pretty significant changes, and quite a few of them do improve the game pretty drastically, to where Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures 2 is actually a pretty fun, decent time. It's not perfect though, because there are indeed a number of things working against it. For one thing, it is a sequel to Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures, so it's really only good in the context of that game. But if you compare this to, say, Pac-Man World or something, then yeah, it's gonna be extremely lacking. Another weird criticism, there's no PC port. Yeah, the original game didn't have a good PC port at all, but I would have at least liked to have the option. The game is apparently on SteamDB for some reason, so a PC port was, I guess, in development at some point. But now here I am, stuck with the Wii U version. No PC port at all. What also actually holds the game back is all the annoying shit that's still in it. For one thing, a lot of the levels are still pretty generic. There is more variety and they are better in this game, but it's still nothing to write home about. You got Pacopolis, of course. It's a fairly typical first level stuff, you know, complete with this one Pac-Man-like maze segment that's really easy because you can jump over all the lines. You then got Pac-Lantis, the water level, which shockingly really isn't that bad. There are even underwater segments that I thought would be god-awful, but turns out they're just the platforming sections, but with different animations. But again, nothing too eventful goes on in this level at all. Then there's fucking Space, the most memorable level in this game, mostly because it's a cheap Mario Galaxy knockoff. And of course, the novelty of Pac-Man going to space. There's then the prehistoric level, just kind of a whatever level 2. It reminds me of the temple in the previous game, but there is a King Kong versus Godzilla boss fight in it, so. And finally, there's the Netherworld, the Bowser's Castle of this game. It's a whatever world, I guess. A big problem that all these worlds have, though, is that they all feel the same. They copy certain mechanics and challenges from previous worlds and put them into the next one. So by the end of the game, you feel like you're doing the same thing. There's also these terrible Star Fox Sin and Punishment sections, where you play as either the pink goth girl or the red dude, and they're just so boring. They're mindless and easy, yet really slow. They suck. These levels are only here to pad out the game time, and it's just, they're garbage. They're garbage. At the same time, though, this game is also way too easy. This game feeds you extra lives. And by the end of the game, when I started dying a little bit more than usual, I was damn well near 80 lives. Jesus Christ, bro. At that point, why even have a life system at all? The game also tends to drag a bit more, I feel like. Even though it's roughly the same length as the original, it's too repetitive and feels like it drags out, yet it's also way too easy and way too short. It really is like a better version of the first game, but includes a lot of the annoying shit that really hurt the first game. I would give it like a 6 or a 7, like it's not a terrible game. If you like 3D platformers, it's pretty harmless. And if you can find it for cheap, it's not terrible either. You can do a lot worse, but reminder, you can also do a lot better. So shockingly, yeah, I would call this a good game, but it certainly ain't a great one. It's a perfectly fine game, but not a whole lot more than that. Oh, and also the story is a fucking garbage. Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures is a weird part of Pac history, and the games are just as weird of a thing to exist. They're not great games whatsoever, but I guess they're serviceable. What's really weird though, and kinda hurts these games a lot and makes them worse in a way, is that for a time this was a Pac-Man. This was the main brand. He was in Mario Kart and shit. This was the main thing they wanted to promote. They wanted this to be Pac-Man for as long as possible. So for a while, and even now, there's been that kind of stigma against these games. That weird Pac-Man reboot relaunch that completely failed, like Sonic Boom before it, or during it, or... Which is really funny because these games aren't anything to write home about at all. They're not terrible, but they're not amazing either. You have a mediocre first game, a pretty bad museum collection, and an okay second game, made to promote a TV show that was pretty much dead on arrival. And what you get is just a weird phase in Pac-Man's history. Weirdly enough, though, it was kind of Sakurai who killed the whole thing. Yeah, Masahiro Sakurai. During the development of Smash 4, Bandai Namco wanted the Ghostly Adventures Pac-Man in their game, but Sakurai, of course, told them to fuck off and put in the original character instead. And this led to Bandai Namco, in my opinion, having a better idea for the character. And this kinda even led to Pac-Man World Repack, a pretty phenomenal remake of the first Pac-Man world. For my money, that's the real shit. Get Pac-Man World Repack if you can. That game is fantastic. Crazy how Ghostly Adventures said that the Pac was back, and that was the whole marketing thing, the Pac is back. But the Pac we really wanted was the Pac deep within our hearts.
It is written that you shall play Pac-Man, and only then shall you know the glory of Pac-Man.
Fuck you in the lanes you came with. Me and you ain't on the same shit. You ain't in my lane, bitch. Nah, throw that shit in fifth. Rollie on my wrist. Ay, baby, you a star. I'm my only wish. I'm counting blue hundreds. I'm too money. Ay, and my little bitch, she too lovely. Yeah, hanging up and calling me right back. Ay, baby, why you calling me like that? Yeah, getting high with the seat laid back. Baby, gon' relax, yeah. Hey, they don't know the half, yeah. No matter what happened, I got your back. Baby, that's the facts, yeah. That's the facts, yeah. We can fight, but the feeling's gone. I try to find the words, but they never come. I can still see you on the lawn. Hey, laying outside in the summer sun. Yeah, we can fight, but the feeling's gone. I try to find the words, but they never come. I can still see you on the lawn. Hey, laying outside in the summer sun. Hey, I'm with a dark-skinned girl on a Sunday. That's that Black Sabbath. She put them ones all down on a Hyundai, and she had to have it. Baby, that's the facts, yeah. That's the facts, yeah.